Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've got a big update in regards to the Middle East, and it's not a great one if you want a nuclear deal. At least on the surface, we're going to go a little bit deeper and see maybe if this is a negotiation tactic. Will Trump support a strike by Israel? And how complicated is this really? And there is a lot of people in the United States, a lot of MAGA people now saying, well, maybe there needs to be strikes because Iran can't have a nuclear bomb. And we want as little countries to have nuclear capability as possible, but we also realize in the 21st century, there are going to be countries, there are going to be adversaries that do have nuclear capability. You're talking about Iran, thousands and thousands and thousands miles away. If the United States or if Israel strikes Iran and the US helps, you're going to be dealing with a bevy of issues. You could argue the first being potential World War III, but even just on a base level, you're going to be dealing with higher energy prices in the United States, which has been one of the things that's helped Trump tame inflation and really offset any inflationary effects of his tariffs. Although the tariffs have been down in terms of just the global 10% tariff, the tariff on China now, Trump says it's around 50%. So the tariffs are not as high as they were after Liberation Day, but the impact of it has been lessened because of the lower energy prices, at least to a lesser degree. Of course, the core inflation does not take into account the energy sector, but still, you look at the true inflation, it's under 2%, in part because of the energy prices. If there's a war with Iran because of the flow of oil, you're going to be dealing with potentially higher prices. The U.S. certainly, for the better part of the last 3 or 4 decades, has taken steps to alleviate the reliance we have on the Middle East for oil. But when you're talking about a global market, there's going to be a global impact. If there is escalation, if you wonder, because of what Trump has said previously, originally a few months ago, the New York Times said, we got a report, and Trump and the administration stopped Netanyahu from launching strikes against Iran. Now they've had 5 rounds of talks. They're supposed to have their 6th round of talks this coming weekend, and they're saying, well, that's canceled now. And you can see it says concern about a strike and the prospect of retaliation led the United States to withdraw diplomats from Iraq. So the U.S. is concerned about, they're saying, well, Israel's going to strike and then there's going to be retaliation. We need to get our troops out of harm's way. So if it's getting that bad, then we understand. I mean, you could say, well, nothing ever happens. Certainly, we hope there's a situation to where I think it'd be a very bad look for the administration, and there would be a lot of people that disapprove it. Now, sure, people are going to spin this, of course. When it comes to Trump, it's not as simple as saying, well, just let them have a nuclear bomb. But we understand back in 2015, that was a 2-year negotiation the Obama administration had with Iran on the original nuclear deal that Trump ended up ripping up, in part because the deal was limited to around 10 years total, and it did allow enrichment of their uranium to around 3.5%. Now, what I find curious is you've got people like Hegseth and Senators Tim Cotton coming out and saying, well, Iran is moving closer, they're developing a nuclear bomb. We already knew that. They've already reported they've got around 60% uranium enrichment, and it's very easy to go from 60% to 90%. Once they get to 90%, that's capability for a nuclear bomb. And so we knew that they were developing a nuclear bomb. That's why we're trying to do this nuclear deal to deter it from happening. And another report came out about a week and a half ago that the administration denied, that the United States, who originally had said, well, we want no enrichment, 0% enrichment, it came out behind the scenes. They quietly said during negotiations, well, they can have 2.5 to 3%, because under Obama, it was 3.67%, I believe, in terms of the enrichment level they could reach. That's nowhere close to 90%, which would be a nuclear bomb, but that's nuclear energy capability. It would be the 3.5% in the enrichment of the uranium. Then Trump has come out publicly and said, no, that's not true. They're going to have 0% enrichment. But you see Trump at these public events, and the question is always talking about a nuclear bomb. Well, obviously, under the Obama deal, they couldn't have a nuclear bomb. They could have 3% enrichment. So why would Trump allow a nuclear bomb? It makes no sense. The question is, will you allow any enrichment at all? It seems like that's what the argument is. And Iran right now, at least it's being reported, they don't want to play ball. They're done. And it's allowing Israel an opening, with these talks falling apart, to potentially launch a strike with the Iranian proxies, Hezbollah and Hamas, weakened. Israel sees this as an opportunity. Israel appears to be preparing to launch an attack on Iran soon, according to officials. Remember, The same thing happened a few months ago. Trump and the administration said, no, you don't have our support. We're not giving you intelligence. They wanted to do a joint military strike of the Iranian nuclear facilities, which are all located in deserts. And Trump said, no, it's not going to happen. We're not doing that. And really, everyone within the administration, I don't know what Rubio's take on it was. I really haven't heard much from Rubio because I know he's so pro-Israel, but I haven't heard much from him. It was more so Trump, Vance, Gabbard, Hegseth, they all came out against it. They said we want diplomacy, and now they've had 5 rounds of talks, and suddenly it's falling apart. Even after some rumblings that there might be some flexibility in terms of the negotiation when it comes to the nuclear enrichment capability of Iran. And so we'll see what happens, but it seems like Israel is getting impatient, and they're saying, well, we're going to do it for you. The issue here is even if Trump would have to immediately come out and disavow this, but even if he did that, the problem is we're funding Israel. We already give them around $4 billion a year just in military aid as a base, and recently it's been a lot more because of their war with Hamas. This is a big problem because if Israel does something by proxy, we're involved and we're supporting Israel because we fund them. Even if Trump says, well, no, I disavow this. So it's a big issue. And you can see the concern about a potential Israeli strike and the prospect of retaliation by Iran led the U.S. on Wednesday to withdraw diplomats from Iraq and authorize a voluntary departure of U.S. military families from the Middle East. So this is preparation for the retaliation from Iran because they're saying Israel potentially will strike. It is unclear how extensive an attack Israel might be preparing, but rising tensions comes after months in which Netanyahu of Israel has pressed Trump to seize on what he sees as a moment of Iranian vulnerability to the strike. Trump waved off another plan by Israel several months ago. That was the one I referenced earlier, to attack Iran, insisting that he wanted a chance to negotiate a deal with Tehran that would choke off Iran's ability to produce more nuclear fuel for a bomb. 2 weeks ago, Trump said that he had warned Netanyahu about launching a strike while U.S. negotiations with Iran were underway. It's not clear how much of an effect Trump made to block Netanyahu again this time, but the president has appeared less optimistic in recent days. And Trump came out yesterday. There was an interview or some type of podcast that was released where Trump said, I don't know what happened to them, talking about Iran, referencing negotiations, saying that Iran, I guess, wasn't playing ball now in terms of their talks to avoid, an Israeli strike and a potential war between Israel and Iran, with the U.S. helping Israel. You could say, well, it's negotiation to pressure Iran. Maybe this is a joint effort by Israel and the United States to say, let's bluff this a little bit. Let's try and get this moving, and let's put pressure on Iran to accept a deal that we want, and with the idea that there will be strikes and the U.S. and Iran are coordinating. Maybe that would threaten Iran to come to an agreement. You could also say that that's a more optimistic, charitable approach in terms of how to view the situation, rather than, well, there have been 5 rounds of talks. There's been very little progress that's been made, and Israel is biting, wanting to desperately strike Iran, and they've wanted to strike Iran for many, many months now. You think with Trump coming in, they probably liked their chances a little bit better well, I don't know, because Trump has talked about no new wars, and he has to understand, you get into a situation like this to where if there are strikes, you get into this gray area. Number one, the immediate reaction is you're going to deal with higher energy prices. We don't know how widespread this would be in terms of an Israel strike, an Iranian response. How does that play out? Does it develop into some type of war with the U.S. helping Israel? And if you're talking about a longer war within the Middle East, I mean, that is the last thing the administration needs, especially with the whole idea of MAGA. We understand, I mean, Iran, we don't want them to have a nuclear bomb. We don't want Pakistan to have a nuclear bomb, but they do have nuclear capability. This is just, I mean, these countries are thousands and thousands and thousands of miles away from the United States. And if we can avoid this, especially with the energy situation, with the oil, that would be the most ideal. And so, again, it's like, well, if you've got a deal on the table that's 3% enrichment, that's got huge oversight from many, many countries, and the deal would not end. You could swing it as a better nuclear deal than the one Obama signed. But again, the one that the Obama administration had, it took them a long, long while to get that. It didn't happen in a month. So these are things to where maybe this is a strategy, maybe this is coordination, but it's hard to say it's coordination because Israel genuinely does want to do this. They do want to strike Iran. So to say this is coordination between the United States and Israel to threaten Iran and kind of pressure them into a better deal that the United States and Israel like, it's an optimistic view because we know Israel does legitimately want to strike. It's not, this could be a bluff, but what Israel wants is not a bluff. They do want to strike Iran, and they wanted to months ago. That's why Trump and the administration said, we're not supporting this. And that's why Israel kind of backed off. Now, would Israel, feeling they've got full control in terms of the U.S. foreign support of them with this administration, would they just say, screw it, we don't care if Trump agrees or not, we're going to strike them? That's something that is to be determined. You can see it says here, word of the U.S. decision to withdraw personnel from the region, along with a warning from Britain about new threats to Middle East commercial shipping, came hours after Trump told the New York Post in a podcast released Wednesday that he had grown less confident about the prospects for a deal with Iran that would limit its ability to develop nuclear weapons. American and Iranian negotiators have been planning to meet on Sunday for another round of talks, although Trump said on Monday that Iran had adopted an unacceptable negotiating position, probably in relation to their uranium enrichment levels that the United States, because Trump has said publicly there's going to be no enrichment. And Iran said there needs to be enrichment, otherwise there's not going to be a deal. Now, what is the enrichment level? That's the question. But if it's around 2 or 3%, it's something that the administration needs to take and run. And just because this is just, it's so bad. Another Middle Eastern war, especially under the MAGA president. Because now you're getting back to the idea of you're going to start hearing the neocon stuff. And, you know, again, the other issue is there's amount of vaguity to it, to where we don't, like, okay, there's strikes, then what happens next? It's a never-ending war. Or it's a war for months, or it's proxy, and you just don't want to deal with that. Especially the immediate impact on energy. Now, again, we have our own oil, and obviously it takes a lot more to frack than to just drill. But there will be a rise in energy costs, and that has been something that has been good to Trump in terms of keeping those lower and helping with the overall, at least taming inflation to a degree. Not to say that we would have, I mean, because you look at the core inflation, it doesn't factor it in. Trump has tamed inflation in general, even with the tariff revenue we're bringing in. By the way, they're talking about the tariff revenue now. Lundin comes out and says it's 88 billion over like 3 months. I mean, this is like even more than I thought. They're saying it's 34 billion a month. I'm gonna have to look into that. That's pretty crazy. You have a British warning came from a maritime trade agency that monitors Middle Eastern shipping, and said that a public advisory that had been made aware of increased tensions within the region that could lead to an escalation of military activity having a direct impact on mariners. And so this is something that it seems like a lot of people within the Middle East are talking about, and we will have to see how this develops. But the overall point here is you want to avoid this 100% for a bevy of reasons. Number one, you don't want a proxy war or a war in which the U.S. is in support of Israel. Again, I know people are talking about a nuclear bomb and they can't have it. But the thing is if the deal is a 3% enrichment, that's not nuclear, not even close to nuclear capability. And then Hegseth comes out and they all say, well, they're getting close to a nuclear bomb. Well, yes, they were getting close 3 months ago when the negotiations kicked off. So it's like, yeah, that's obviously propaganda for U.S. citizens, is what it is. To say, well, see, there has to be, it's justifying strikes against Iran because they were already, if they're at 60% enrichment, yes, they're about 2 or 3 weeks, experts say maybe a month away from having nuclear capability. That's if they're at 60% enrichment. But we knew that already. So to say that, and now they're trying to it's this fear-mongering campaign, but we want a nuclear deal. We really do. Do people like 3% enrichment? Like, come on. Obama had 3.67% enrichment. There has to be diplomacy. There have to be deals. It's 2025. There's no excuse for a proxy war in the Middle East started under Trump. And you could say, well, it's Israel doing it in the U.S. But the problem is we fund Israel. So it's a bad look, man. It is a bad look. And you just hope that this is some type of, and again, we don't know exactly, because maybe the administration will come out and say, no, we don't support what Israel is doing. But it's one of those things with the amount of Zionists in the Trump administration, the amount of money we already give them, you'd have to take a hardline stance against it and say, no, we're not giving you intelligence. We don't like this. But now Trump is saying, well, the talks are not going well. I mean, there's a strategy to why Trump is making this public. It's not just like, oh, it's because it's likely a pressure onto Iran to try and negotiate and get them to agree to what the administration wants in terms of the nuclear deal. You'd have to say that's probably what it is. But I mean, this is legit. Israel does want to do this, and the hope is that this can be avoided through pressure on Iran during these negotiations. If they do have their next round of talks, which are supposed to be on Sunday, that would be the hope. And there's some type of deal that gets done. And we want a deal. This would be great for Trump if there was a deal that got done. We understand that, some people that within the administration, I mean, I see it on social media. There's a lot of people that still have a neocon view. It's like, you're talking about a country 8,000 or 9,000 miles away, whether they have nuclear capability or not. The amount of harm that this would do to the administration over a 3% enrichment level. And this, you could argue, is just what Israel is rooting for this to fall apart. So they sense a weakness within Iran, and it's time to strike. And so that you could argue they've been rooting for this deal to fall apart for a while now. Ever since really 2 months ago, we knew they wanted to strike, and the administration said no. Let us try and do some form of diplomacy. So we'll see what happens. But the hope here is that, I mean, if there are strikes from Israel, the administration comes out against it. But it becomes an issue because you are talking about immediate strikes by Israel, a retaliation by Iran, and there we go. Get ready to rumble. And it's nothing the administration needs right now, especially when you've got Trump's track record, the idea of being no new wars, and now we've got a neocon war in the Middle East kicking up. And you could say, well, it's because they can't have nuclear capability, but it's 2025. These countries that are adversaries are going to have nuclear capability. I mean, Pakistan was close to they were saying to using a nuclear bomb against India. I'm not saying it's right. I'm saying there's countries that are very unstable that have nuclear bombs. So it's like, what do you want us to do? We can't police this. And there's already been so much negativity about the Ukraine situation. And trust me, the amount of money the United States has given Ukraine is insane in terms of military weaponry. Insane. It's historic. And you could argue against that, but I'm just saying that, the administration and previously when Republicans didn't have the presidency, there was a huge segment that said the war with Russia is just horrible. Us funding Ukraine is terrible. Well, now are we going to fund Israel? I mean, we already are funding Israel, but now are we going to support Israel and it's just, it's two steps back. Let's just not do this. This is a pressure tactic by the administration. Why else would Trump be public about it? He's telling Iran publicly, you need to come to a table and negotiate this. We're moving diplomats out because we don't want them to be in harm's way. But I mean, it is crazy to think they're moving the diplomats out because they're worried about retaliation already from Iran. It's not even just about Israel strikes or anything like that. They're saying Israel's going to do it and then Iran's going to retaliate. So we need our people out. So we'll see what happens with this. But listen, the hope is that there's some type of nuclear deal, I would say. I think that's the best case by far. But guys, make sure you like the video down below. Also follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.